Okay, we are in the ninth week and the lecture 29. Uh, yeah, you should be familiar with this slide because this is the last slide of the previous lecture, lecture 28.2. uh, Once again, I'm very sorry I made a mistake. Somehow, my mobile phone, with which I'm taking this lecture, cannot go over 33 minutes, and then I just concentrate on the lecture and didn't notice that whether it goes over 33, then it's automatically make another file. That is why sometimes, actually very often, the lecture is divided and ended suddenly from your point of view. Anyway, what we have talked about is there is a gap because it's such a low probability for the individuals. However, as a nation, for this unlikely contingency is a sure thing for the government. So they should have the default rule, which means unless the individual uh, had some clause in their contract, they have to follow the government rule. Otherwise, they will fight and no conclusion. So this unlikely contingencies government should consider, and they have to make all these default rules, and that composed of the thick contract law because it should contain all those unlikely events and what the contract would have done in that event if it was that contingency was considered. But then it's easy for one to say that government should prepare default rules, but default rule can be many things. If there is an argument between Tom and Jim, some default rule would be happy for Tom, but not very happy for Jim, or other default rule would be very happy for Jim and not happy for Tom. For example, this coronavirus, the government has a default rule which may be very, very unfortunate for me, but very, very fortunate for the student. I may risk myself, my life to teach offline, but the student would be happy to get a high quality offline lectures. But then, I would say, oh, that's not fair. I should have signed a contract about this and things like that. So, what is the optimal, efficient, or best default rules? How can we get there? Or if it happens, how the judge would fill the gap to make the best default rules? The answer is hypothetical bargaining. What does that mean? Hypothetical bargaining means when you come to the default rule, obviously you didn't consider it when you originally signed the contract. I didn't consider the possibility of coronavirus, or I didn't consider the possibility, I mentioned it previously, the water tank of my building ruptured and poured into my computer, my computer got dead kind of situation. I never considered it. Okay? Now you're a judge, and Professor Han comes to you and say, I didn't consider it when I signed a contract with the Yonsei University, but number one, the water tank ruptured, and the university's, your rule says university doesn't have to pay for me, but I think that's not correct default rule. Please make it fixed. Or I say, the default rule says coronavirus, whatever, your life may be in risk, but Professor Han, you're a professor, you have to go to the class and teach. And I'm very unhappy about that, and please do something. Then, as a judge, you say, let me think. Let's assume the unrealistic situation, but let's go back to 2002 when Professor Han signed Yonsei University. And then at the time, they very seriously considered the possibility there was a coronavirus pandemic and what they would do if that's the case. Should they do the offline class or online class? So it's like a thinking experiment. But yeah, we may well as follow the hypothetical bargaining. So the bargaining didn't happen in 2002 when Professor Han signed the contract, but hypothetically, unrealistically, let's assume that it happened. So time machine, we go back to 2002. Yonsei University says, if the student wants offline lecture, regardless of the corona pandemic situation, will you teach? And Professor Han said, oh, I may get sick, very sick. Are you going to pay the hospital fee and extra compensation for my being sick if I ever get infected? Yonsei University says, sure, we'll pay $1 per hour. I said, come on, I'll never do that. My life is so valuable. I will never go to the offline lecture because I might get infected and I might die. Maybe the percentage like 1%. That's too high for me. But then my wife kicks in and tell me, if every month, for example, if Professor Han is getting like $5,000 per month, if the Yonsei University say, oh, because you go to the classroom risking your life, we'll pay you, we'll double the payment. So you are going to get paid instead of 5,000, 10,000 a month. Then I'll let my husband to go. I said, come on, it's my contract. But then I think about it. If I don't agree with my wife, my life would be like hell. My wife might kill me, seriously. So I said, okay, if Yonsei University pay me twice the salary of mine, even though my life would be in great risk, I am willing to go to the classroom with masks on and teach the 150 students. Okay, but then what about my death? Do you have any insurance for that? The answer says blah, 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 and things like that. This never happened. But then, in judge's mind, in order to make the default rule, he should consider that. And in real situation, if Yonsei University really has to force Professor Han to go into the offline class instead of online, they have to pay the double salary because the risk compensation, something like that. So if this is what would have happened if they actually bargained, negotiated in 2002, in 2020, the judge said, I think this would have happened. So this should be the default rule. And this this default rule was a product of hypothetical bargaining. Understand? One more time. You should be familiar because this is one of the early classes, probably lecture 2, the post office case revisited. There was a typhoon in an island and CEO was there. He couldn't come back. And he has a very important business message and he sent it by telegram at the post office. But post office made a mistake. It misdelivered the telegram to someone else. As a result, the CEO lost $10 million, big money. And then the CEO says, the post office should pay me $10 million because it is only because of misdelivery I lost this $10 million. the contract obviously say the post office would deliver, but it doesn't say if it ever misdelivered, what would be the penalty. And the penalty would be, if it's happy birthday mom kind of telegram, maybe you just pay him $10 or something. But if it's like $10 million business telegram, it's serious. But obviously the post office and the CEO didn't have any contract phrase in it. What if the message is worth 10 million? Okay, so as a judge, you should have filled the gap. And once again, the rule how to make the default rule, the principle to make the efficient best default rule is getting the time machine going back to the time before the telegram was actually sent, and hypothetically, what if the post office and CEO negotiated about it? The CEO actually say, if this telegram is not delivered, it's going to be $10 million loss, and I want you to pay me $10 million. What would the post office says? If the post office said, don't worry, we'll deliver, and if it's not delivered, I'll pay you $10 million. No. If any regional post office officer, chief of the post office would not say that. Probably the chief of the post office of that island would say, well, you really want to make it sure that it would be delivered, and if it's misdelivered, then you want the post office to pay you? If that's yes, I usually charge $10 for the telegram, but in your case, you should pay me $10,000. Why? Because I cannot take the risk. I should get insured. And when I ask the insurance company for this case, they say, if you pay me $10,000, then we'll pay the CEO $10 million if it ever happens. So that's the offer from post office. What would you do if you're a CEO? Are you gonna pay $10,000 for one speed telegram? We already talked about it. Probably the CEO said, okay, you don't have to pay me $10 million. Just send this telegram. Oh, by the way, twice. So I'm paying you $20. Then the CEO would make a telephone call to his vice CEO or deputies and tell them, please do this. And then he may email it, he may fax it, he may text message send them, or Kakao Talk message send them, and maybe call them again, telegram them again, like each of them 5 times in 5 method. Then what happens? What is the chance of all these 25 method fails? 0, actually. And then the CEO spent how much money? I think less than $100. So instead of $10,000 he paid for the post office for the insurance and making sure, he just spent maybe 1 hour of his time and $100. He can make sure that $10 million loss would not happen. So it's kind of the rule of economics. If the post office has to be responsible for this risk, the post office should have a huge cost. The post office do not know the telephone number of deputies, do not know the mobile phone number, do not know the email address. So it has to deliver the telegram for sure, and it's insured. As a result, the cost will be very high. On the other hand, the CEO has much more information. All other method, it can telegram, it can fax it, it can call the mobile phone, email it, things like that. So CEO can handle this risk at a much, much lower cost. So who has higher cost of handling this risk? CEO. So if they ever negotiate, post office charge high price, CEO said, oh, instead of $10,000, I'll spend just $100, then the result would be same, virtually same. So I will do that. So this hypothetical bargaining, the free market system is all about trade, and trade is about bargaining and negotiating and finding out cheaper, better way. And hypothetical bargaining, in judge's mind, actually do that exercise in mind and said, okay, if this ever happens, it's much cheaper for the CEO to handle the risk of not delivering the message may not be delivered than the post office. And that's what they would do. And that's why I would verdict that the post office doesn't have to pay the $10 million. It's the fault of CEO because he has lower cost of handling the risk, but he didn't. And moreover, more importantly, I want to send a message to the future CEOs in this situation. You are responsible. Don't rely on the post office. Instead, you should handle the risk. That's the message the judge and legal system want to send. And when the message was sent, that society and nation would be a more efficient society and more efficient nation. Okay. So we are entering a different topic, still in contract. Probably I'm gonna do this topic mandatory rules, not this 9th week, but mostly in 10th week. But then I will give you just a small hint of smell what you can expect in the 10th week. My God, we're almost end of 9th week and only 5 weeks left because it's the 14 weeks and the exam. I wonder if I would ever see your face. Of course, I see your face on a computer when I check your attendance and things like that. But anyway, hope that at least I can see you in probably late May or early June. I already mentioned that when there's a contract and default rule, which means if the contract says if this happens, Jim and Tom should do this. If that was already in there, and that is different from default rule, one should follow the contract because what would be better than the agreement of the two people involved than some judge who does not fully understand the situation. So the default rule is necessary only when the contract has a gap. If the contract does not have a gap, you don't have to look at the default rule. The contract would be regarded as a higher principle. But there is sometimes even though there's no gap, the contract should be nullified. That is mandatory rule. The mandatory rule is something that the government says, we don't care whether you agree or not. You shouldn't do that, or you should do this. So it's higher position. Each position is higher than the contract, and if the contract you signed violate the mandatory rule, your contract is ineffective. We cannot enforce it. How is that possible? Yes, it's possible. We are going to talk that a lot in the 10th week, but today I'm going to give you just one example, that is spillover. Yeah, it interests me a lot when I first saw it. Hopefully it interests you too. This is a situation with two competing firms and one labor union. So there are two forms, Form 1 and Form 2. They are making same thing in the same market, so they are competing each other. But in this area, there is only one labor union. So this one labor union governs the workers of Form 1 and workers of Form 2. Let's assume that Form 1 and the union sign a contract voluntarily, and it says if union agree with less than 20% wage increase for Form 2, union will work for Form 1 free forever. Wow, did you get that? The Form 2 is not signing anything, but only Form 1 and union is signing, but their conditions are depending on what the union would do with Form 2. So probably Form 1 offers a very high wage to union, but saying that I'm paying you this much only if you ask Form 2 200% wage increase. What kind of company can compete with 200% wage increase? So which means you are pushing the Form 2, your competitor, out of the market. Then Form 1 will be a monopoly and it will get a higher profit, so it would be able to pay a high wage to labor union. And if you do not charge 200% wage increase and push Form 2 out of business, union will work free of charge for Form 1, which means union should do this kind of thing. What would be happening? The union will ask 200 something wage increase, like impossible wage increase. Form 2 say, no, I cannot do that. Union says, okay, then we cannot work for you. Good luck, because otherwise we will have to work free for Form 1. So the Form 2, whether it accept the 200% wage increase or not, would be out of business, and Form 1 would be a monopoly, and they will be happy with the labor union forever. But is that good for the society? First of all, not good at all for Form 2. And in a free market, we need competition, and this is exactly what Form should not do. Have you heard about Fair Trade Committee, like 공정거래위원회? You go to jail. If you do this, you go to jail. I said, oh, this is ridiculous. How can any company and labor union would do this? But when I talk to the business people, like small CEOs, they say, wow, this happens a lot in real life. Not only labor union, like Form 1 and some other Form 3, and Form 3 is doing something for Form 1 and 2, and Form 1 and Form 3 can make a contract, which is illegal. I'm emphasizing you shouldn't do that. You go to jail. But kind of secretly saying that, Form 1 says, oh, okay, I'll pay you more than the market price for your product, Form 3. But then the condition is you never provide your product to Form 1. For example, Form 3 is making important engine part for Form 1, or automobile company, and Form 2, another automobile company. And Form 1 can say, don't sell it to Form 2. Form 3, you only sell to us. Otherwise, you are going to be punished. You are going to pay so much penalty money and things like that. You sign it on the contract. That contract cannot be admitted for the government. Actually, not only the government does not enforce the contract, but they put you in jail, Form 1 and Form 3. Okay? So, this we call spillover. The Form 1 and union is making the contract, but the direct effect will be not Form 1, not the union, but Form 2. So, two people make a contract, and that gives a conspiracy and very bad effect to another people. Another good example is cartel. I mean, companies sign a contract to raise price. Who's going to lose? The companies would have a higher profit because their price goes up, but consumers pay a very, very high, unfairly high prices. Okay? That's why the cartel is illegal. So if you ever sign a contract which says let's raise the price together kind of thing, then the government will never enforce your contract promises and probably you go to jail. So mandatory rules example is like this. Most of the case, if individuals agree upon something and sign a contract and the government endorse it. But then, there are some cases, even though the individual agree on something, like the case of spillover, the government say, no, 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 I don't care whether you agree upon or not, it's against government policy. You shouldn't do that. We can never enforce it. So, there are other interesting examples of mandatory rules, and I hope that the next lecture, lecture 30, okay, lecture 30, this is lecture 29, lecture 30, which will be the next week, week 10, would be kind of enjoyable, not very much mathematics and complicated stuff. Okay, thanks for you're listening to this class, and this is end of lecture 29, also the end of week 9. Thank you.